Recap in minutes. In today's video, we will be enjoying a drama thriller film, entitled Silencer. There will be spoilers ahead, chill out and enjoy. The movie begins in northern Iraq with a squad of snipers from the United States overseeing an attempt to retrieve and move Yusuf Abad, a leader of a terrorist group, and his family to an extraction point for evacuation. On the other hand, the terrorists get information that the American soldiers are coming. So all their training is coming to a head, that this is their land, so they must defend it. Later, while the snipers are conversing, then they get eyes on their target and his vehicle. Although they disagree with Yusuf's free pass as he's a terrorist, they must follow the orders for political reasons. Yusuf requests that the United States soldiers protect him because he believes the soldiers own vital information that could serve them. On the other hand, several members of the terrorist group are moving towards the pickup point through a secret route. They didn't stay silent when their leader was about to be captured by the soldiers. They want to thwart the soldiers' efforts, one of which is to disable the sniper squad first. Later, the terrorist group manages to locate one sniper, but the soldier immediately takes the terrorist down. Then, as Dawson, one of the soldiers, reports that they discovered him, a sniper kills him. So Frank, one of the US soldiers and the head of the sniper squad, removes his earpiece, gets out of his place, and goes to Dawson's despite the other sniper, Timothy, telling him not to break position. After that, things get out of control when the terrorists manage to corner them. This forces Frank to take unexpected and unplanned action, killing the terrorist leader and his family. 10 years later, in Las Cruces, New Mexico, Frank, who left the military, doesn't deny that the shooting incident still haunts him. It weighs on his mind so much that he can't tell anyone about it. He then attends a support group where everyone shares what they're going through, but when they ask him if he wants to share anything, he rejects it. After no longer being a soldier, Frank devotes much of his time to running his auto repair shop, now his primary income source. Later that day, Frank and one of his staff, Pedro, complete their work on fixing a customer's vehicle and invites him for dinner. However, Pedro rejects it because he's got a date. In the evening, Frank is having dinner with his wife, Cassie, and stepdaughter, Shannon. Cassie then asks him to take her and Shannon on a weekend getaway. Still, he tells them that he has to take the repaired car to the customer's house, so Cassie insists that she come along. However, he says that he'll bring Pedro, but Cassie tells him they will ride the pickup and wouldn't let him leave them stuck on a Saturday. Since Shannon uses her charms to convince him, he finally agrees for them to go with him. However, he feels a little worried because the customer is none other than a crime lord with whom he had previously worked. The following day, he shows up at the residence of the crime lord and meets one of the lord's most formidable men, Nelson, with a young lady. He then tells him she's a little young, but Nelson asks him if he's lost. He then replies that he's there for delivery, and Nelson calls him the grease monkey and tells him he'll show him where to go. Frank then says he knows where to go and is about to leave when Nelson grabs him, and they physically fight. When Nelson takes out his knife attempting to stab Frank, a man named Lazarus, known as the crime lord's right hand, appears and instantly steps in to intervene. Lazarus then takes Frank to meet the crime lord named Leo. When they arrive inside, he sees a birthday surprise for Nikki, Leo's daughter. Then, Nikki comes with her father and asks Leo if she can ride her bike gifted by Leo. When he sees Nelson having a snack in his kitchen, he orders him to watch over Nikki. But Nelson objects, asking why he always has to run errands, making Leo angry. Leo then tells him he'll ask Lazarus to cut out his tongue if he ever talks to him like that again. Then, Frank receives an envelope containing enough cash from Leo to pay for the repair of his car. However, he realizes that the amount of money is too much if only to pay for repairs. Leo says he did this on purpose because he wants to offer him to return to work as a hitman, but Frank refuses the offer. Even so, Leo gives him the envelope with the money and lets him go from there. After that, he returns to their truck with Cassie and Shannon waiting for him, then drives back home. In the evening, Frank woke up from a nightmare about the incident 10 years ago. He then calls Timothy, but he doesn't speak when Timothy answers. The next evening, he sees the news that Nikki died in an accident caused by a hit-and-run driver, which saddens him as he just witnessed how much Leo loved her. Cassie then asks him what's wrong, but he shakes his head and refuses to answer. Then, he receives a call from Lazarus but doesn't answer it. Not long after, Lazarus and his men visit Frank, who tells him that Leo wants him to help him avenge the death of his daughter. At first, he refuses and says that it doesn't consist of him fixing an automobile, and he doesn't want to go back into the world of gangsters. However, because Lazarus threatens him, he has no other choice. Meanwhile, Cassie, who saw the arrival of Lazarus and Leo's men at their house, asks why they want to see him at this time of night. He then tells her there's nothing to worry about, for it's just old business and has nothing to do with them. Then Shannon interrupts them, asking Frank to tuck her in. After that, Frank tells Cassie he has to go, but he refuses when she asks her to stay. So, she becomes angry and slaps him. Yet, he tells her he's not going to hit her, causing her to push her away and leave. Arriving at Leo's place, he sees him, who still looks frustrated and depressed over the death of his daughter. Leo then speaks about how he wants the man to die, but Frank tells him to have Lazarus do it. However, Leo says that he does good work if he wants to level the city, but for such a situation, he needs him. Frank then says he's already retired, but Leo threatens to tell Cassie about his dark past if he refuses to help him. And because he doesn't want his wife to know about his history, he finally agrees to Leo's offer. The next day, Lazarus hands Frank complete documents regarding the perpetrator so he can immediately carry out his mission. It didn't take long for Frank to find the whereabouts of the culprit, so after determining the proper position, he rushes to set up his sniper rifle to take action. Seeing the perpetrator with his family, Frank recalls the incident where he made a fatal mistake that has always weighed on his mind. Not wanting to make the same mistake, he decides not to kill the man and let the police arrest him. However, unbeknownst to him, Leo ordered one of his men to watch him from a distance and report it to Leo. Knowing that he didn't act at all and instead allowed the police to arrest the man, Leo orders Lazarus to kill the perpetrator and Frank. Elsewhere, Cassie, who's at home, got surprised by the presence of Lazarus and Leo's men, who shoot her and kidnap Shannon. After that, Lazarus and his men manage to seize the perpetrator from the police and then take him to a place for them to torture him to death as Leo orders. Meanwhile, Frank arrives home, surprised to find Cassie lying helpless, and rushes her to the hospital. He then meets one of his former comrades on the sniper squad named Timothy and asks for help with Shannon's kidnapping. After Timothy agrees to help him, Frank meets Cassie at the hospital, who seems devastated by what happened to her and Shannon. She feels furious at Frank because he lied to her all this time and caused all this to happen. He then approaches her, apologizes for everything, promises that he and Timothy will bring Shannon home safely, and asks her to rest. Frank and Timothy then rush to Leo's house, but when they get there, he finds out that Leo and Lazarus aren't there, and neither is Shannon. Then, Timothy manages to bring down Leo's only henchman, who's still there. However, when he catches Frank off guard, he reaches for Frank's gun to shoot him. Timothy then kills the man without thinking, making it difficult for them to get information about Shannon's whereabouts. Meanwhile, Leo, who's still devastated by the death of his daughter, then takes Shannon to his hometown. Even though Leo treats her very well, like his daughter, Shannon is still afraid and wants to return to her mother. On the other hand, Leo's wife, Marta, considers his actions to kidnap Shannon too much and tries to convince him to end all this, but he ignores her. Having worked for Leo for some time, Frank can locate where they can get information about Leo and Lazarus. Frank and Timothy visit one of Leo's largest drug factories in Mexico. They quickly take down his men and extract information about Shannon's whereabouts. Meanwhile, Lazarus, who had anticipated that Frank would come to them, orders Nelson to kill him. However, Frank finds Nelson having fun at a bar, where he attacks him and forces him to tell Shannon's whereabouts. At the same time, Timothy beats up the rest of Leo's men. After getting the desired information, Frank then kills Nelson. Knowing the location of Shannon being held captive at Leo's house, Frank and Timothy prepare their weapons to face Leo and all his men to save Shannon. On the other hand, Lazarus is preparing all his men to guard Leo's residence so Frank can infiltrate there. However, Lazarus and his men are no match for Frank and Timothy, who are professional snipers, so they're easily defeated in gun battles. Although in the process, Timothy gets seriously injured, so Frank has to continue his mission alone. Knowing that Lazarus and his men are losing the battle, Leo rushes to take Shannon away from there at gunpoint. However, as they leave, they come across Frank, who asks Leo to hand Shannon over to him, and promises to keep him alive in exchange. Marta, who's there, then tries to convince Leo to let Shannon go because she's not their daughter and has her own family who loves her very much. However, Leo still ignores her and everything she's saying and prepares to attack Frank. Shannon then sees an opportunity to catch Leo off guard, so she bites his hand, causing Leo to turn his attention away from Frank for a moment. Frank then throws a knife into Leo's heart, killing him. The movie ends with Frank bringing Shannon home and keeping his promise to Cassie, who has forgiven him and accepts him as he is. Thanks for watching, subscribe for more videos like this, and help the channel grow.